Welcome to our audio family. Dear friends, every listener matters to us, and we'd love to know which corner of the world you're listening from. Your support through a quick subscribe and a like helps us keep weaving more stories like this. Enjoy the journey. Irina had always trusted that her marriage was forever, so when her husband coolly announced he was leaving, the shock hit like an icy wave. She bit back the hurt, forcing a calm smile, and handed him an envelope of farewell gift, sealed in silence. Morning light seeped through heavy kitchen curtains as she reached for the coffee tin on the top shelf. A sudden stab of pain shot through her wrist. She flinched, then smoothed her features into practiced serenity. The fragrance of toast and freshly ground beans filled the air while she arranged 3 cups with ceremonial precision. The white china with a blue mosaic for Andrei, a bright orange mug for their daughter Elisa, and her own ivory-glazed ceramic. Little rituals, fragile stitches in the fabric of family life. The coffee's getting cold, she said softly. Andrei nodded without lifting his eyes, thumbs dancing across his phone news feeds. Emails. Somewhere far from this table. Thanks, he murmured, still elsewhere. 14-year-old Elisa caught her mother's glance. She was old enough to read the tension adults pretended to hide. One eyebrow lifted. Irina answered with a fleeting, wistful smile. When did I become invisible? She wondered, catching her reflection in the cabinet glass. And why did it take me so long to notice? While Andrei turned away and Elisa buried her face in a textbook, Irina slipped a pill from her housecoat pocket, swallowing it with a gulp of lukewarm coffee. 32 stories above the city. Andrei's office window framed a perfectly ordered skyline mirroring the tidy graphs glowing on his monitor. Documents lay aligned on the dark wood desk, as disciplined as their owner. You're jumpy today, said Igor, his deputy and only real friend. I'm leaving Irina. Andrei heard himself say, surprised by his own certainty. Igor whistled. Low, 15 years of marriage. Does she know? Not yet. Tonight, a memory flashed his father's face, twisted with anger. No tears, boy. Men don't cry. 9-year-old Andrei had clutched his lifeless dog, sobbing, until his father tore the small body away and ordered him to wash his face in cold water. So there's someone else, Igor ventured. Margareta. With her I feel alive, unafraid to be vulnerable. He left the deeper truth unspoken. With Margareta he could finally allow weakness. He dreaded the evening ahead. Irina would suffer silently, fighting to keep the family intact for Elisa's sake. He didn't want drawn-out agony, or tears, or pleas. If she hates me, it will be easier for both of us, he decided, rehearsing words sharp enough to wound, sharp enough to end everything quickly. A doctor's office, walls sterile white, posters of skeletal joints glaring down. Rheumatoid arthritis, the physician announced, studying Irina's test results. Challenging, yes, but not the end of the world. Irina Mikhailovna, she stared at her hands, still elegant, long-fingered, nails perfectly kept, hands that might soon refuse to obey. Will stress make it worse? She asked, already knowing the answer. The clock was ticking toward nightfall, toward the moment Andrei would shatter their carefully arranged cups and rituals with a few ruthless sentences, while Irina braced herself, unaware of just how much pain one evening could hold. She asked the question already knowing the answer. You definitely need rest, fresh air, no emotional strain, regular medication, physiotherapy, and most importantly, support from loved ones. Irina gave a bitter smile just to herself. Rest, no emotional strain in her house. I understand, doctor. I'll follow your recommendations. But she had already made up her mind she wouldn't tell anyone. Not her husband, who had spent the last few months looking right through her. Not her daughter, drowning in upcoming exams. She would handle it alone, like she always had. As she stepped out of the clinic, her eyes landed on a towering billboard. Mountain air, the best medicine. Alpine Valley Resort. A wooden cabin set against the backdrop of towering peaks. The valley bathed in misty dawn light. Something stirred inside her, a long-forgotten feeling, desire. She hadn't wanted anything for herself in so long that she'd almost forgotten how it felt. The Alpine Valley looked inviting but noble. She wanted something quieter, hidden, a place with no crowds, no noise, no eyes watching her. Something told her that healing would only come in silence. It was nearly 11 p.m. when Andrei walked in. Irina sat in the living room with a book open in her lap, though she hadn't read a single word in the last hour. We need to talk, he said, standing in the doorway, coat still on, of course. She closed the book and sat up straighter, like a patient in a consultation room. I'm leaving you, just like that. There's another woman, Margareta. He waited, bracing for the explosion. Tears, accusations, screaming something. But Irina just looked at him with those calm, gray eyes. I haven't felt anything for you in a long time, he added, trying to sound cold. Final. Our marriage was a mistake. Margareta, she understands me. He poured venom into every word, hoping to trigger a reaction, anything to justify his escape. Pain, outrage, a breakdown, something to ease his guilt. But Irina only watched him, as if seeing him for the first time. Then, slowly, she stood. I see, she said softly. When are you planning to move out? Her calmness threw him off. He had expected a storm, not still water. Within the week, he replied, half relieved, half unsettled. All right, I'll pack your things. She turned away, pretending to straighten books on the shelf. Inside, a storm was tearing through her. Her heart cracked wide open, but in that raw moment, a strange sense of relief bloomed now. She wouldn't have to tell him, wouldn't have to watch his reaction, wouldn't have to worry about seeming weak or like a burden. This is what you wanted, isn't it? She said without turning. My tears, my anger. I'm sorry to disappoint you. The front door slammed open. Elisa was home. Irina quickly wiped her eyes and put on a smile. Mama, what happened? Elisa froze, instantly sensing the tension. Sweetheart, we need to talk. Your father. He's decided it's best if we live apart. Elisa walked into the room and sat down across from her mother. Her face, usually bright and expressive, was suddenly serious. Older, he's leaving for another woman. Irina flinched. You knew? No, but I'm not blind. You too. You live in the same house, but it's like you're on different planets. Irina looked at her daughter in disbelief. When did this girl become so sharp? I thought you'd be devastated. I am, Elisa interrupted, but not surprised. She was quiet for a moment, then her voice softer. Don't argue with me, Mama. I've seen you wince when you thought no one was looking. Irina felt the lump rising in her throat. What did the doctor say? Nothing serious, Irina lied. Just need some rest. Then take it, Elisa said, almost pleading. Go to the mountains. Like you always dreamed of, please. Just go. Grandma used to say that when you were little and got sick, they'd send you to the mountains. She said something changed in you up there, that you came alive, like a different person altogether. There was something in their daughter's eyes, a quiet, almost piercing tenderness. For the first time in years, Irina didn't feel alone. That night, when the house had gone still, Irina pulled out an old box of photographs. The first one was of her and Andrei on their very first date. They were laughing, their eyes glowing. Then their wedding photos. She was in a white dress, and he had his arms gently wrapped around her waist. His eyes held so much love. In another photo, Andrei held their baby girl, Elisa, proudly in his arms. The pride, the joy, the love, it was all there, frozen in time. But then, slowly, from one photo to the next, the warmth began to fade. Smiles became forced, poses stiff, family portraits turned into lifeless routines. When had they stopped being happy? And how had she stayed silent for so long? At the bottom of the box, she found a faded tourist brochure, Cabins in the Mountains. Andrei had brought it back from a work trip 3 years ago. They had talked about going there, just the two of them, but life got in the way. Work schedules, Elisa's school. The brochure had been forgotten like so many of their dreams. Her hand trembled as she picked up a pen and began to write. Dear Andrei, I was never truly honest with you. The words poured out of her like a dam breaking everything she had held inside for years. She wrote about how she saw the fear he tried to hide behind strength. About her own silence, born from a childhood spent next to a mother who never showed affection. About two people both scarred by their fear of closeness, trying to build something they didn't know how to create. I won't stay silent anymore, she wrote, even if the only one who hears me is this paper. Andrei was packing shirts into a suitcase when he felt her presence behind him. Irina stood in the doorway. There was no bitterness in her face, no blame, just a strange calmness, like someone who had finally made peace with something deep inside. As he zipped the last compartment and stood up, she stepped forward and held out a white envelope. What's this? He asked, not reaching for it. Read it. When you're alone, she replied, her lips curling into a smile he hadn't seen in years, soft, mysterious, almost defiant. He took the envelope and tucked it into the inside pocket of his jacket without a word. From the window, Irina watched his car disappear into the night. She wasn't crying, she wasn't afraid. Sometimes the end is really the beginning in disguise. The new apartment met Andrei with an echo of emptiness. The minimalist decor, chosen by Margarita, felt sterile, soulless. He dropped his keys on a glass side table, sank into a chair without taking off his coat. The white envelope pressed against his chest like it was burning through fabric. He pulled it out instead, batted. Something in him didn't want to open it. Maybe it was guilt, maybe fear. Fear of what? Accusations, legal threats, demands. But when he finally tore it open, what he found was something entirely different. Dear Andrei, I was never truly honest with you. Line after line. His expression changed. She wasn't blaming him. She wasn't attacking. She was simply opening her heart. She spoke of their shared silence, their inherited fears, how they lived side by side, yet never truly saw each other. I saw you cry at night when you thought I was asleep. After your mother passed, after Elisa was born, I saw the real you, the one your father taught to hide. And then, near the end of the letter, almost as an afterthought, came a sentence that struck like lightning. A recent diagnosis has made me see life differently. The doctors say I need peace and fresh air, preferably in the mountains. Maybe now, or maybe this is my chance to finally listen to myself. He read that line again and again. Diagnosis? What diagnosis? She had never said anything, never hinted. His hands shook as he reached for his phone. He dialed her number. Long rings. Voicemail. He tried again. Still nothing. A cold pressure gripped his chest. She's sick, and you left her for your own comfort. He stood at her door now, outside the home they once shared. He didn't have the courage to use his key. Not anymore. So he knocked. An ass. A husband, but as someone who had just realized what he might have lost forever. Vera Petrovna, Irina's mother, opened the door. Her already thin lips tightened even more at the sight of her son-in-law. "Where's Irina?" he asked, skipping any form of greeting. "Good afternoon, Andrei," Vera Petrovna replied with a cold politeness that cut deeper than any insult. "Come in. Since you're here, Elisa will be glad to see you." The living room he had left just 3 days ago already felt different. Something had shifted quietly, almost invisibly. A few trinkets were gone. The abstract painting had been replaced by a peaceful mountain landscape. "Where is Irina?" he asked again, this time more firmly. "I need to talk to her." "She's gone." Vera Petrovna sat down in a chair, her back straight like she was facing a school principal. "What did you expect? That she'd sit here and wait while you played with your new toy? Gone where?" "Do you know how I stayed married to her father for 40 years? She said instead of answering, eyes fixed on the window. "I learned not to expect anything from him. Irina, it seems, endured as long as she could. Lucky for her you left first." Elisa entered the room, wearing cozy sweatpants and a sweater, headphones resting on her neck. "Hi, Dad," she said with an overly neutral tone. "Elisa, where's your mom?" She's sick." She looked at him intently as if deciding whether he was even worthy of the truth. "Did you want her to hate you?" she asked instead. "Too bad. Even now she says she understands." Do you know about her illness?" Andrei asked, his voice trembling. "Tell me first, why are you here? To bring her back? Or just to ease your conscience?" He hesitated. "I just want to know what's going on." "Rheumatoid arthritis," Elisa said after a long silence. "It's early stage, but progressing. She needs peace. Clean air. Mountain air." A chill crept through Andrei's chest. He remembered her wincing when reaching for dishes on a high shelf. How she'd rub her wrists at night. "Why didn't she tell me?" he blurted out. "Why should she?" Elisa shrugged. "So you'd stay out of pity?" Back in his cold, empty apartment, Andrei felt the full weight of loneliness settle on him like a lead blanket. He pulled out Irina's letter again and read it slowly this time. He understood what was written between the lines. The mountain village of Alkovka felt to Irina like something from a film too beautiful to be real. The air was dizzyingly pure, and the silence rang in her ears after so many years of city noise. She had originally planned to visit a mountain resort called Alpine Valley, but changed her mind at the last minute. Instead of noisy crowds and spa retreats, she chose a quiet village tucked away between the peaks. No trendy restaurants, no pampering, just stillness and healing. She stood on the porch of a small wooden house she had found through an ATite. Was simple but cozy, with a view of the mountains and a small garden. So unlike the sleek, sterile apartment she had shared with Andrei. "Good afternoon. You must be the new tenant," came a voice. Irina turned. A tall man in his 50s, weathered face and kind eyes, stood at the gate. "I'm Stanislav, the local doctor." He introduced himself. "I live next door. Thought I'd stop by to say hello." "Nice to meet you," Irina smiled. "I'm Irina. You made a good choice." Stanislav nodded toward the house. "This place has good energy." The previous owners were a very happy couple, moved to the city to be with their kids. They still visit every summer. Couldn't bear to leave the mountains completely. There was something in his gaze that made Irina ask, "Have you always lived here?" "No," he smiled. "I used to be a successful doctor in the capital. People thought I lost my mind when I moved here." "Why did you do it?" "I've realized this place isn't just about healing the body, it's where you learn to live in peace with yourself," he said simply. "And you?" he asked. "What brought you here?" Irina hesitated. "I need to learn how to live in peace with myself too." Stanislav gave a knowing nod. "Then you're in the right place. The mountains have a way of healing the soul, even deeper than the body." That night, lying in an unfamiliar bed, surrounded by creaking wooden walls and the whispering wind rustling through the trees, Irina felt something she hadn't in years, a strange mix of fear and hope. For the first time in a very long time, she was truly alone. But this loneliness didn't feel like a prison. It felt like freedom. In the morning, she found an empty notebook in the desk drawer. On the first page, she wrote in careful letters, "Day 1, a new life." Meanwhile, the restaurant was buzzing, fashionable, noisy, air thick with perfume and voices. Too many people, too many distractions, too little space to breathe. "You're not even listening," said Margarita, her voice tight with irritation. "Sorry, I was just thinking about work," Andrei lied. He took a long gulp of wine, trying to drown the familiar irritation building in his chest. It had been a month since he left Irina. A month with Margarita vivid, passionate, alive. She was talking about her upcoming gallery exhibition. She was successful, talented. Andrei heard the words, but they passed through him like smoke. In his mind, fragments of Irina's letter replayed like echoes. At night, the nightmares returned, his father shouting forbidding tears. Irina walking away on a narrow mountain trail, her hands twisted in pain. You would wake up soaked in sweat, choking on all the things he never said. You're here with me the same way you were with her, Margarita said suddenly, her voice sharper now, physically present, but miles away. What are you talking about? When we first got together you said life with Irina was dull, that she didn't get you. But it's not about her, is it? It's about you. Andrew went silent. And, in that silence, a truth hit him like a wave. Margarita wasn't really love. She was escape. Escape from himself. From responsibility. From the terrifying vulnerability of real connection. Part of him wanted to argue, to yell, to explain that it was more complicated. But the words jammed in his throat, like they always did. I love you, he said finally, avoiding her eyes. No, Margarita replied, shaking her head. You love the idea of me, the freedom I represent, but I'm a real person, Andre. I want something real. Not to be someone's refuge from their own reflection. He didn't stop her when she walked away. He knew she was right. A part of him ached to run after her, to beg her to stay, to prove he was capable of real love. But the other part, the one he always obeyed, told him to stand tall and take the hit in silence, just like a man was taught to, you know. What's really sad, Margarita said before leaving. You're so afraid someone might see the real you, that you've forgotten who that even is. Back in his empty apartment, Andre pulled out the old, creased envelope again. Irina's handwriting blurred through his tears. That night he did something he hadn't allowed himself in years. He buried his face in a pillow, and cried like a child punished for feeling too much. 6 months passed, the mountains had changed. Irina, her skin was sun-kissed, her figure leaner, but more than anything, there was a new light in her eyes, a spark that had been missing for years. Each morning began with a quiet walk to the stream. She spent hours gathering herbs with her elderly neighbor, who knew the healing secrets of every plant. Her days were filled with simple, grounding routines, tending the garden, preparing food, sipping tea on the porch under the setting sun. Stanislav visited often. He wasn't just monitoring her health. He shared stories of the mountains, of traditions, of the time he came here just for a little while, and never left. In the city I lived for others, Irina said one evening as they watched the sun sink behind the peaks. Here I've finally started living for myself. The mountains heal those who are honest with themselves. Stanislav smiled. But don't expect miracles in a day. Arthritis is chronic, it's a long road ahead. He never asked about her past, but he was always ready to listen. When she was ready to share, she thought of her husband emotionally scarred by his father. She thought of herself so used to silencing her own needs. Their marriage had lacked one vital thing, the courage to be real with each other. Every week, Irina wrote long letters to her daughter, not typed out quickly on a phone, but written by hand, the ink carrying her breath, her trembling hope. Inside each envelope she placed a pressed flower or a dried leaf, fragments of the mountains she now called home. The illness receded slowly, dragging its feet like a shadow that refused to let go. There were setbacks, days when her hands went numb again, refusing to obey, when it felt like all her effort was meaningless. But Stanislav the doctor reminded her gently, again and again, this is a marathon, not a sprint. Direction matters more than speed. 6 months of treatment, therapy, stillness, and hard-won peace finally bore fruit. One morning, walking down to the river, Irina suddenly realized her movements had become easier, her body felt lighter, freer, and in that moment, tears welled up in her eyes, not from pain, but from joy. Far away, another conversation was taking shape, one that had waited a lifetime. The old house looked just as it had in childhood, severe, precise, disciplined, like the man who owned it. Andre stood at the porch, gathering courage before pressing the doorbell. He hadn't seen his father in over a year, not since the man retired and left the city. Their conversations had always been formal, stiff, practical, never personal. Good day, son, his father said, as though he'd been waiting. Still upright, still rigid, hair now fully gray at the temples. Hello, father. Andre stepped inside, instantly struck by the spotless, impersonal interior. Not a single photo, not one sentimental object. A room for a soldier, not a man. What brings you here? Problems at work. No personal. His father's mouth tightened, again with emotions. I thought you'd grown past that. For the first time, Andre didn't feel shame. He felt anger, yes, bother, my emotions. The ones you trained me to suppress all my life. Do you know what that led to? I destroyed my family because I never learned how to say what I feel. He braced for the backlash, but it never came. His father simply lowered himself into a chair, as though something inside him gave out. I raised you to be a man, he said softly, to be strong, and I became a coward, afraid of his own heart. A silence stretched between them. But something in his father's eyes shifted, a weariness that hadn't been there before. I did what I thought was right, the old man whispered. That's how I was raised. Your father hit you, Andre said suddenly without thinking. The words had surfaced from somewhere deeper. His father flinched. Just barely. I never laid a hand on you, he said quietly, and looked away for the first time in Andrew's life. In that moment, the cold, iron-willed man in front of him ceased to be a tyrant. He was just an old man, broken by what he could never escape. You know she's sick, Andrei said, and yet she left alone. Because I made it impossible for her to stay. I pushed her away. Who Irina, she has rheumatoid arthritis. And I left her for another woman. And I tried intentionally to hurt her, so she'd hate me so I wouldn't have to feel guilty, you understand? The silence was long. Then, his father spoke softer than ever before. I did the same thing too, your mother. The confession hit Andrei like a punch. It said more than 1,000 words ever could. Later, he stood in Alyssa's room, posters on the wall, headphones tangled on the desk, clothes tossed on the chair, a teenager's kingdom. And yet he felt like a stranger there, but something had shifted in him. After talking to his father, he understood. It wasn't guilt driving him anymore. It was something else, a need to make things right, even if it was too late. On Alyssa's desk lay an opened envelope just like the ones Irina had always sent, a letter from mother to daughter. His eyes drifted to a single line, almost involuntarily, Alcove Car, Riverside Street, House 7. He noticed the bedside drawer slightly open. Inside a packet of pills and a medical file. Hands cold, he flipped through it. Rheumatoid arthritis. Progressive form, risk of joint deformation. Requires ongoing treatment. He placed it all back with care, then stood. A strange clarity washed over him. He didn't need any more signs. He knew where he was going, and this time he knew why. The next day, Andrei sat across from the company board. After 15 years of spotless service, his request to work remotely for most of the time was approved under one condition: weekly video calls and a visit to headquarters once a month. Ironically, the very digital transformation he had championed in recent years now became his lifeline. Personal reasons, he said simply when the CEO asked. Nothing serious, I hope. Quite the opposite, Andrei replied, his voice steady. It's the most serious thing I've ever faced. That evening, his car pulled out of the city, heading toward the mountains. He wasn't going to win Irina back, no, not this time. He was going to speak the truth, the whole truth. About himself, about the fears that had followed him like shadows, and about how tired he was of running from them. Far away in a quiet mountain village, Irina sat on the porch, watching the sun's last light turn the peaks to molten gold. Beside her stood Stanislav, his gaze warm and quietly serious. Your markers have improved significantly, he said, scanning her medical results. The inflammation's reduced. Activity indicators are down. Is it remission? She asked, her voice full of cautious hope. It's the beginning of recovery. Not just your body, he added with a gentle smile. Your soul too, Irina. She nodded, a strange flutter of anticipation rising in her chest, as if the universe was holding its breath ready to reveal something that would shift the ground beneath her feet once again. Summer had drenched the mountains in warmth and wild blooms. Irina's terrace was strung with garlands of meadow flowers and paper lanterns. Elisa had spent the entire day decorating. It had been nearly a year since Irina left their city apartment, choosing to start over, completely. A year of reckoning, of painful healing, of rediscovering life. The table on the veranda was set for dinner. Irina, wearing a light summer dress, was laying out the plates. Elisa watched her from the corner of her eye, amazed at how alive, how radiant her mother looked now. Dad's late, the girl remarked, glancing at the time. He called. He be here any minute, Irina replied, then added with a soft smile, here comes Stanislav. A familiar figure was walking up the path. Over the past months, Stanislav had become a regular guest, first as her doctor, then as something more, a friend, a steady presence. Elisa ran up to him, beaming. I collected that herb you showed me, she said proudly, and I made a herbarium too. Well done, he smiled, handing Irina a bouquet of wildflowers. She's going to make a great botanist, he added. Or a doctor, Elisa chimed in with a proud grin. Before they could say more, the sound of a car pulling up broke the conversation. The gate creaked open, and Andrei walked into the yard, carrying a large basket of fresh fruit. Sorry I'm late, he said, kissing Irina lightly on the cheek. Video conference with the head office couldn't cut it short. He hugged Elisa warmly and shook Stanislav's hand with quiet respect. The two men had built something fragile yet functional, a calm, cautious understanding. Andrei had rented a small house just half an hour from Irina's, close enough to see them often, far enough to give space. He'd built a proper home office there and managed his projects remotely, heading into the city just once a month. Dinner that night felt surprisingly easy, light, peaceful. Elisa watched her parents joke with each other, speak freely without tension or tiptoeing. Remember when we were afraid to say anything honest, Irina said as she poured tea. And now we can argue about anything and not worry it'll break us. Andrei nodded. Because now it's built on truth, not fear. In his eyes, there was a flicker of something darker, a quiet reminder that the war inside him wasn't over, that some days he still wanted to retreat behind sarcasm or hide from difficult talks. But now he had a compass, a direction, and that compass pointed to honesty no matter how uncomfortable it was. Stanislav lifted his cup in a playful toast. Healing, he said, looking at Irina and not just the body. Though even the physical healing had been remarkable. What they'd achieved in a year would usually take 2, sometimes 3. Irina smiled. For the first time in a long time, the future didn't feel like a cliff edge. It felt like a path. Winding, yes, but filled with light. The remission was stable though, of course. The illness hadn't vanished completely. It's all thanks to herbs and mountain air, Irina said with a gentle smile, rubbing her wrist in that familiar motion, a subtle reminder that healing from arthritis is a journey, not a destination. And a good doctor, added Andrei. There was no trace of jealousy in his voice, no, only sincere gratitude. After dinner, as the sun dipped behind the mountains, Stanislav was the first to rise from the table. I should get going, he said. Early rounds tomorrow. I check on some of the older folks in the village. When he turned to Irina to say goodbye, his eyes held a deep respect and quiet acceptance, as if to say, whatever path you choose, I understand. Take care of yourself, he said simply. Thank you for everything, Irina replied, her voice soft but full of meaning. And both of them knew those words carried much more than politeness. They held closure and peace. Once Stanislav left, Elisa slipped inside under the pretense of helping with the dishes, but in truth she was giving her parents a moment alone. Irina and Andrei remained on the porch, watching as the first stars pierced through the deepening dusk. A quiet summer evening wrapped around them, full of cool air and the gentle scent of wild herbs. I thought I had lost everything, Irina said, eyes fixed on the sky. But it turns out I found myself. Andrei gently took her hand. Even now, just a simple touch brought a storm of emotion. Regret over the past, fear of what lay ahead, but above all, deep gratitude for this moment. Feelings he had once pushed away, he was finally learning to accept. Can we make it? He asked softly. Irina turned to him. In her eyes, the stars reflected like tiny truths. I don't know, she answered honestly. But at least now we're not lying to each other. He nodded. That answer held no promises of forever, no illusions of easy happiness, but it held something far more real, hope and the chance to start over. Not with perfect certainty, but with the courage to be honest, to be themselves. If this story moved you, please consider supporting us with a like and a subscription. It means the world to our team and gives us the strength to bring you new stories every day. Thank you for being here. Please forgive any missteps or pronunciation errors along the way. I'm learning and growing with every story I tell. Take care of yourselves and may you always find your own peace and happiness.